Chapter 36. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt disposed him at Jerusalem, and fined the land 100 talents of silver, and a talent of gold. And the king of Egypt made Eliakim his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. And Necho took Jehoahaz his brother, and carried him to Egypt. And Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. Against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and bound him in fetters, and to carry him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also carried of the vessels of the house of the Lord to Babylon, and put them in the temple at Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, and his abominations which he did, and that which was found in him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin his son reigned in his stead. And Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And at the return of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon, with the goodly vessels of the house of the Lord, and made Zedekiah his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord his God, and humbled not himself before Jeremiah the prophet, speaking from the mouth of the Lord. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God, but he stiffened his neck, and hardened his heart from turning unto the Lord, the God of Israel. Moreover, all the chiefs of the priests and the people transgressed very greatly, after all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent to them by messengers, sending before and often, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, and despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Therefore he brought upon them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man or hoary-headed. He gave them all into his hand, and all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king, and of his princes. And all these he brought to Babylon, and they burnt the house of God, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had been paid her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 60 years. Now in the 1st year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, All the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord, the God of heaven, given me, and hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whosoever there is among you of all his people, the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. All right, let's go back up to verse 1, and keeping in mind the Passover that was kept in last chapter yesterday. There's no Passover kept like this since the days of Shemuel, since the days when before God gave them a king. We'll find out it would be their final and their great end offerings unto God. And Josiah would not heed to the word of God, which he sent by Necho, who he had sent against the house of Camash. And Yoshia would come out and try to fight against Necho, and he would be slain there in Megiddo, or receive the wound that would lead to his death. And we will find out that they would gather all together after Yoshia was dead, and it would be Jehoahaz, his son, would be the king now. We're going to finish up this book of Chronicles because we're going to go through the last few kings today, and we're going to wind up in a period of Cyrus at the end. And we're going to pick it up here in verse 1. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And the people of the land, that's everybody that was there, would take Jehoahaz. This is God has seized, the one whom God has seized, and we remember that, or God has grasped, God has taken hold of. He is the one that come forth from Josiah, these that found God, or actually found the law of God. And he made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And he's going to be the king, and we'll notice his name's going to be shortened now to Yochaz, because it means the same thing. It means the same thing. Verse 2, Yochaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And Jehoahaz, as one God seized, or God grasped, he was 23 years old. And this is redemption, and going to be completed here in these greater understandings, even of old, because it's going to be 20, say, that's redemption. And 20 is also 2 tens. That's so we can witness the law, God said, was going to happen. And he would reign for these 3 months, and this would be his period of reign, and that was 3 months, and that's to complete this understanding, even from the lesser light that we will receive in Jerusalem. That's that place of peaceful teachings that God's been making an example of. 3. And the king of Egypt disposed him at Jerusalem, and fined the land 100 talents of silver, and a talent of gold. And Necho, that would be who would be the king of Egypt at that time, he's the lamer. He is the king of Egypt. That's that land of enclosures, I call it. The land of pits, snares, crypts, graves, whatever you want to call it. It's holes. And he disposed him at Jerusalem. And in other words, what he did was he took him away from Jerusalem and he carried him off to Egypt. We will find that documented in the book of Kings. And he fines the land 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And this 100, because see, it's the judgment being weighed out for the silver. And that's that generation. It's going to pass through the fire. It's got to pass through the judgment of God, see, to pay for their sin. And a talent of gold, because it's been weighed out in gold. That's that which belongs to God anyway. 4. And the king of Egypt made Eliakim, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. And Necho took Yochaz, his brother, and carried him to Egypt. And the king of Egypt, he would take Eliakim, and Eliakim is going to be the brother of Yochaz, and Jehoahaz, and Eliakim is this mighty one is set up. He is the mighty one as set up, and we'll find out that the king of Egypt, that's the king of the Melech of that land of enclosures, is going to change his name to, though, God has set up, or this one set up by God. And he carries Yochaz, or this one that God has seized, off to Egypt, that land of enclosures. 5. And Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. Now Jehoiakim, he is the new king, and this is the one whom God has set up. That's one God said he was going to set up. And he is 25 years old. Because 20, once again, that's redemption. To witness the law is redemption. There's grace in the greater understandings of old. There's grace in the law if you will listen and you will witness the judgments of God. And he's going to reign. This will going to be his period of reign, or even that understanding that comes from God. 11 years in Jerusalem. And 11 years is because the law, that's 10 and 1, is going to have a beginning in these greater understandings in Jerusalem. And we'll find out it's going to be judgment. See, on that place of peaceful teachings. Jehoiakim, he's going to do evil in the sight of God. He's not going to follow God. They're not going to turn. 6. Against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and bound him in fetters to carry him to Babylon. And now this king of Babylon's going to come out. We're not going to hear no more about the king of Egypt. He's done. The king of Babylon has driven him back, and Babel is to be confusion. It's to be Babel. It's like Babel or a baby talk. It has no understanding to that language which we speak. It's Babel. It's confusion. It's the place of confusion. Babylon is, and the king of Babylon is Nebuchadnezzar, and he is that prophet that protects the crown. 7. And Nebuchadnezzar also carried of the vessels of the house of the Lord to Babylon, and put them in the temple at Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar, this prophet that protects the crown, he's going to carry off all these vessels of the house of God, these things that belong to God. They're hallowed. They were hallowed, these vessels, those things that contain. And he's going to put them in the temple there, the temple at Babylon, and that's that temple at confusion, or that place where they'll gather there. 8. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, and his abominations which he did, and that which was found in him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin, his son, reigns in his stead. And Jehoiakim, and all the evil that he did, we can find it. It's documented, it's written down so we all can read it, and we can all have a witness, see, of how he did not follow after God, how he didn't set the correct example. But Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim is one God raised up. He's going to be gone, and we're going to find out Jehoiachin, his son, that one that come forth from him, is going to reign instead, and that God is established. And elsewhere in the Bible, Jehoiachin is referred to as Cananiah, and that is, we'll find out, his son. Jehoiachin would be the son of Jehoiakim. 9. And Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Jehoiachin, that which God has established, he's 8 years old when he begins to reign. 8, that's a new beginning, once again, in the greater understandings of old, when he begins to reign. And that's because then, this new beginning, Jehoiachin's only 8 years old. He does evil in the sight of God. I guess his counselors led him in the evil paths, because an 8-year-old is not responsible. And 10, at the return of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon with the goodly vessels of the house of the Lord, and made Zedekiah his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem. And at the return of the year, when the full circle of the year had went around, that's that greater understanding. This King Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to be the prophet that protects the crown. He's the king of Babylon, or the Molech of confusion. Brought him to Babylon, and that Jehoiachin, he's going to be 9 years old now. They're going to carry him off to Babylon, and all the goodly vessels of the house of the Lord, and made Zedekiah his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem. These were all the goodly vessels that were left. These things that contained, they belonged to God. They was in the house of God. And he's going to make Zedekiah king instead of Jehoiachin. Zedekiah is this justice of God, and that's why we find out God's establishing here his justice, his judgment, just what he said he would do if they didn't obey the law. Zedekiah is the brother of Jehoiachin, and that's to have the same mother. They share the same understanding. He is the king of Judah and Jerusalem, and that is that place of praisings and that place of peaceful teachings. 11, Zedekiah was 21 years old when he begins to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And Zedekiah, this justice of God, or we could even say the judgment almost, was 21 years old. And that, once again, that's redemption. In the beginning of these greater understandings of old, see, once again, we can witness the law, because that is redemption. See, God doing just what he said he was going to do. God's always good to keep out his word, keep his word. He warns you. He says, turn. And when you don't turn, God's going to punish you now. That's what he says. And he's going to reign this 11 years, and that, once again, that rain is just like rain coming down from God. It's the former rains, the latter rains, these understandings God give, even these kings, which we can use for examples, these teachings he gave us by them. These 11 years, because it's going to be the law in the beginning of the greater understanding of Jerusalem, even that law which he gave them in the beginning. 12, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. He humbled not himself before Jeremiah, the prophet, speaking from the mouth of the Lord. We'll find out Zedekiah. We remember Zedekiah did everything he could to save the king's house, but did not turn to God, even though, we'll see, that he didn't humble himself. Even though Jeremiah, the prophet, that's that one God appointed, he was the appointed of God, the prophet, that speaker, spoke to him, even from the mouth of the Lord. 13. Also, and he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who made him swear by God, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart from turning unto the Lord, the God of Israel. And he also rebels against Nebuchadnezzar, this prophet that protects the crown. He made him swear by God. He made him swear by God himself. But we'll find out he stiffened his neck. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen to God. He wouldn't listen to Jeremiah. He wouldn't listen to Nebuchadnezzar, even. 14. Moreover, all the chiefs of the priests and the people transgressed very greatly after all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. Moreover, in addition to, it wasn't just Zedekiah, we find out, see. It was all the chiefs of the priests, these rulers over those that stand before God, and the people, see, all of them, all the chiefs, transgressed very greatly after all the abominations of the nations. And they transgressed. To transgress means you trespass. That means to violate the law of God. That is sin. See, that's what sin is violation of the law, the statutes, and the ordinances which God gives. And when they do, see, what they do is they present to society something that's acceptable, making it acceptable that which is not acceptable to God. And they polluted the house of the Lord. They pollute. And that means to corrupt it through making acceptable things that are not acceptable to God. This place which God hallowed, that means he set it aside. That's God's. You can't touch it. See, it's in Jerusalem. It's in that place of peaceful teachings. We're going to find out. And God exacted great judgment. 15. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent to them by his messengers, sending before and often, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. And we'll find it's written, it's documented, these prophets that came, that God sent to them, his messengers. See, these ones that would bring these messages of warning to you. It's like Tekoa. It's that place of warning. It's that sounding of trumpets. Sending them before and often. God always sending the warnings, because he has compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. God has compassion. His mercy endureth forever. 16. But they mocked the messengers of God, and despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. But they mocked the messengers of God. They just laugh at them, act like they're idiots. They don't know nothing. They got no understanding. Despise the words. They hate what they're saying. Why? They ain't giving cookies and Kool-Aid out. And they scoffed at his prophets. They didn't want to hear none of these speakers that God had sent. These witnesses that he's given even from the past. These things he's got wrote down. We got them wrote down so we can use them as this. Until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people. Until there was no remedy. There's just no cure for it, we might say. Therefore, 17, he brought upon them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary. And he had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man or hoary-headed. He gave them all into his hand. Therefore, we'll find out the Lord turns his head for a moment and looks away to judgment. And when he does, here comes the enemies, these Molechs of the Chaldeans. These Chaldeans were the clod breakers. They used to follow the plow. They were the lowliest of the land. Now they thought to be the wisest. I guess they learned a lot walking behind the plow, breaking the clod. And they slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary. That's right there in the house of God. And they had no compassion upon young man or maiden, because we'll find out they're not respecters. They don't care who you are. Young man, maiden, aged man. That's old man is not an old man. It's a man of age, man who's reached the age of understanding, or a hoary-headed. That's the old gray-haired, wild-haired. And this is should have great understanding. But now, see, he gave them all to his hand. He gave them all over into the works of Nebuchadnezzar and these Chaldeans. 18. And all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. And all the vessels of the house of God, all those that contain all that hallowedness, that holiness, all that of God, it belongs to God, great and small, all the treasures, all of it. We'll find out. It's documented. And the treasures of the kings, all the stuff the king had too. He didn't get to keep none of his stuff. And his princes, all the rulers. We're going to find out all the goodliness. All these he brought to Babylon. And once again, that's that land of confusion. 19. And they burnt the house of God, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And they burnt the house of God, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. That's that place that's separated. That's what a wall is. A wall is a place that separates that city of peaceful teachings from everywhere else. And that's where the house of God was, see, and God had it destroyed, because we'll find out God raises it up, and God has the ability to destroy it when they don't keep that qualifier. Remember the qualifier? If you keep my commandments, if you do according to my statutes and my ordinances. See, that qualifier they didn't keep. And they destroy all the goodly vessels thereof. These, once again, all these goodly things that was found therein. 20. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and his sons till the reign of the kingdom of Persia. And them that had escaped from the sword, these that had managed to survive the slaying, and he carries them off to Babylon, even carries them off to confusion, where they were become his servants to him and his sons, this until the reign of the kingdom of Persia. And that's to become the servants of Nebuchadnezzar. That's that prophet that protects the crown, him and his sons, those ones that come forth from him, until this reign of this kingdom of Persia. And this kingdom of Persia, once again, this reign, this new reign, it's this kingdom, it's this dominion of this king, and he's over Persia. And that's Persia's splendor. It's all the great splendor, wonderful, all the shinings out, and great wonderful splendor. 21, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had been paid her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years, and to fulfill the word of the Lord, according to what God had spoke by the mouth of Jeremiah. That's the one who was appointed by God, till the land had paid for her Sabbaths. And these were those rests that they didn't keep, those Sabbaths that they didn't keep. We'll find out all that period of time of those Sabbaths that had went uncelebrated. That's a law, see. And God said you will do it. So there was a constant breaking of the law. And because as long as the land lays desolate, see, we find out that she does keep her Shabbat. That is her Sabbath. That's her rest. God said, 6 days shall you work, and in the seventh you shall rest. And that's where I get that what it is just to be quiet. Shut up. And that's because let God do the talking. Let God do the instructing. 70 years. 70, because it's to complete. A score is 20. to complete that redemption, see, or to complete the witness of the law and these 10 years, because, see, the law is going to be the greater understanding of it all. It always is. That's the beginning, and it's going to be the end, one way or the other. 22. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, the king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, now, and this would be the first year of Cyrus. He's the king of Persia. And we're going to find out this is the period where Persia comes in and they're going to take over. They're going to take over all this land. We'll find it's going to be documented. This beginning now of these greater understandings of Cyrus, he's going to be the king of Persia. And Cyrus is this one who possesses the furnace. He's the possessor of the furnace. He is the Molech of splendor. He is the Molech of Persia, and that's to be the king, that Molech. He's the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. That once again, this word of God might be accomplished by the mouth. That's that one of Jeremiah. That's the one appointed of God. He poured it out. He stirs up this spirit, and that's even the understanding of Cyrus. He's the king of Persia. Once again, Cyrus is that possessor of the furnace, and that furnace is where they've been burning them there. And what that is that place where they burn. And it was a place of judgment. We can find it documented by Nimrod, king of Babylon. We're going to get to that soon here, and we get to Daniel. And he makes this proclamation throughout all his kingdom, because we're going to find out God has given him rule over much. And that he put it also in writing, that he had it written down, and we're going to go through that documentation, because, see, it's there, written down. Now, anytime you write it down, it's so it can stay. That's so somebody else can read it, understand it, witness what you've witnessed. Thus, 23, thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord, the God of heaven, given me, and hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whosoever there is among you of all his people, the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. And this was going to be the documentation. This is what Cyrus had written right here. Thus saith Cyrus, the king of Persia. And this would be the proclamation that Cyrus sent out. Cyrus, once again, he is that one who controls the furnace, rules the furnace. He is the keeper of the furnace. He is the Molech of splendor. And all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord, the God of heaven, given him. And he hath charged him to build him a house in Jerusalem. And that's going to be that place of peaceful teachings, which is in Judah, that place of praisings. And whosoever there is among you of all his people, that's those that have understanding, the Lord, his God, be with him. Let him go up. Let him go up, we'll find out, and build that house that God commanded. We're going to move forward from here. We're going to be in this period of Cyrus, a little bit prior to, leading up to this period of time. We're going to have to bounce back a little bit to a period now, and we're going to move forward to Daniel is where we're going, and I hope to see you there. Turn and return.